Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Hannah. Today is pretty much the second half of my February wrap-up, as I tried doing a mid-month video this time. I think that's kind of how I'm gonna do the wrap-ups from now on, as it's just so much easier to talk about the books when they're split up into sections and not just like 10 books at once. One thing I did discover this month is that I am not afraid to DNF a book. DNF means did not finish. When I was a teenager, I always felt like I had to push through whatever book I was reading, and I just always had the thought in the back of my mind of, well, maybe it gets better. And even if it never did, I just always felt like I needed to get to the finish line. Not so much anymore. It's been 10 years since I was a teenager, and I am just completely over forcing myself to finish a book. If I'm not into it, I'm just gonna put it down and pick up something else. Nothing against the books or anything, but if it doesn't work for me, it doesn't work for me. And on that note, we're gonna be starting with a DNF and ending with a DNF. Because in my videos, I do go through them in the chronological order that I read them. Or in this case, attempted to read them. So the first book is Cthulhu's Reign. It was first published in 2010. It is a horror anthology of H.P. Lovecraft's mythos, and is a book that I have had for a really long time. I remember I got this at a local bookshop in my hometown. I think I was a teenager. Well, it came out in 2010, so yeah, that would have been my last year of being a teenager. I always been interested in H.P. Lovecraft stories, so when I saw this on the bookshelf, I just kind of had to have it. I love the concept of Cthulhu, and I love and I love the theory of the blip actually being Cthulhu or some other like sea monster type creature, and things like that really intrigue me. I don't know why I never picked this up to actually read until now, but oh boy, was that a disappointment. So this book is edited by Daryl Schweitzer, and I'll read off the authors that contributed here. I personally don't recognize any of the names, but maybe you do. So there's stories by Ian Watson, Don Webb, Mike Allen, Ken Asamatsu, Will Murray, Matt Carden, Daryl Schweitzer. Oh, so he edited it and contributed a story, I guess. John R. Foltz, John Langan, Jay Lake, Gregory Frost, Brian Stableford, Laird Barron. Is that the guy that made that other book? I'll have to double check that. Richard A. Lupoff and Fred Chappell. So there's like maybe one name on there I recognize. But going through the reviews on Goodreads, one of the criticisms I did see about this is that it seemed like all of the authors received the same writing prompt. So for me, I'm really glad I put it down after the first story, because not only was it pretty boring and not much happening, but the first page has some really weird imagery and descriptions. So the first story is by Ian Watson, and it's called The Walker in the Cemetery, and I was really intrigued by that. Like, that sounds super interesting to me. But in the first paragraph of the first story, first page, there's the description of: bird of paradise flowers passed by me, as did giant blooms in the shape of large lacquered red hearts, from which protruded what looked like long, thin, white penises with green foreskins. Well, that's okay. The narrator is female in this first story, and I don't know, when I'm admiring flowers, I'm not usually thinking about dicks, so that kind of caught me off guard, especially just to open up the story with. But then, the end of this chapter it goes into hentai territory by ending with tentacle sexual assault. Yeah, it was just like, nope, I'm done. I put it down after that, and yeah, this is one I'm not gonna pick up again. So the next few books I actually don't physically have anymore, as I returned them to the library. I had noticed that the library had some books that I've been trying to get for a while, so I kind of just returned the ones that I had in order to get the other ones. People also had some of the books that I had on hold, so I already read them, so like I kind of felt bad just holding on to them still, so I'll just have to like pop up a picture or something here. So the next book I read, I actually did a reading vlog on that just went up. It is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab. Everyone and their dog has heard about this book by now. I think every YouTuber I've ever watched has talked about this book, so honestly I'm just gonna skip over what it's about, because if you're curious you can watch my reading vlog and see my deeper thoughts about it, because I really babble on and on about this. It was released in 2020. It is like historical fiction, fantasy, romance, which there is more romance than I personally was expecting. So this book is slow. Oh my god. It personally felt like it took forever to read this thing. It was also a lot more predictable than I was expecting, and so that ended up being a disappointment for me. I really just wanted something fresh and new, and yeah, it just didn't catch my interest like I expected it to. I would describe this book overall as being a slice of life with an overarching plot. There's just so many chapters of normal day-to-day life where not much really happens that I just kind of felt like I was watching a slice of life anime. This book has multiple points of view and multiple timelines. We have a timeline of Addie in the past, we have the point of view of Addie in modern times, and then we have the point of view of this other character, Henry, that she ends up meeting and interacting with, and we have his point of view in modern times, and we also have his past as well. So we have 4 different types of chapters we can possibly get throughout this book, which also adds to the length of it, and it was too much. It was way too much. Personally, I loved Addie's past timeline the most, because it's about her dealing with the curse and learning how to live with it. And for me, by far, that was the most interesting. Everything else could have fucked off for all I cared. The modern timeline just got so boring, and it did not live up to the hype that I've heard about it. If anyone else is reading the international paperback version though, my favorite chapter, even though it's only 3 pages, is from page 293 to 295. I thought that was the most beautiful chapter, and I loved it. I did end up rating this book 3.5 out of 5. However, as I was editing my reading vlog, actually, I feel like I convinced myself that it's probably even a lower rating than that, because like I don't know, I'm just so conflicted about this book in the end, because there were chapters that I really loved and I really enjoyed the past ones as well, and then there were chapters that just seemed so pointless and just felt like it was there to add length to the book. And so it's just such opposite ends of the spectrum of like enjoyment that giving it a solid rating is pretty much impossible for me. So I think in my reading vlog I said a 3, but then I added a 0.5 on it after, so I don't know, it's somewhere in there. Next I read This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Motar and Max Gladstone. This was published in 2019 and is a sci-fi romance. This was a book that had me confused most of the time. The basic plot of it is that there are these 2 agencies that are zipping through time and changing events and making sure certain things happen or don't happen. things like that. And they don't agree with each other, so they're like in their own time war. And one agent from this one agency and one agent from this other agency, they start leaving letters to each other when they're on the jobs for the other to find. And at first it's this rivalry between the two, and they're always trying to one-up each other, but then it kind of turns more into them liking each other and eventually falling in love with each other, and so it kind of turns into a love story. One thing I did like about this book is it wastes no time, it jumps right into it, it's pretty short. I think it's under like 200 pages or just about 200 pages or something like that. But because it just jumped right in, I had no fucking clue what was going on. I don't read much sci-fi, so the terminology and stuff they were using was just way over my head. I didn't know what was up, what was down. I didn't understand what they actually were at first because I thought they were like human, but it seems like one of the characters is more like an android or something like that, or maybe just a pure robot, I'm not sure. And the other person is, honestly, it made me think like a druid from a video game, because she can like shapeshift and stuff. So I'm not really sure what they are 100% in the end. The writing itself was really poetic. However, it was poetic in that way where you have to read it multiple times to understand fully, and you might want a dictionary on hand as well. For me personally, the last half of the book was better than the first, and I don't know if that's just because I got used to the writing, maybe, but it did seem easier to read as I went along. Also, the letters between the agents were definitely my favorite part of the book. I didn't really care for the chapters in between. If it was just the letters, I think I would have enjoyed it more. In the end, I gave this book a 2 out of 5 just because I was reading it, not really absorbing what was happening a lot of the time just because I couldn't really understand. I did like the characters themselves and their design and how they were slowly shown and revealed to us throughout the book. Personally, I viewed them more as like abstract beings, especially with how they move through time and just how they describe themselves. So in the end, it was just okay for me since I could only really enjoy pieces of the story. Next is another book I don't physically have, and that is The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. I've never read anything by this author before. I have no idea why this book was on my TBR. It just was at my library, and since it was there, I picked it up. I thought it was an older book, but it was published in 2019, so it's pretty recent. It is a mystery thriller, and this one really surprised me. God, how do I even describe this book? Ugh. So this book is about this 25-year-old woman who inherits this old decrepit mansion. She had been adopted, and this mansion comes from a trust from her birth parents. So it's all just a shock to her and everything, and it's in a rich part of town, and so she knows she's going to be able to like sell this house and make a lot of money off of it and stuff. So her whole life is changing. However, when she gets to the house and learns more about the history of the house, she realizes that her past is a lot more chaotic than she could have ever imagined, and that her biological family had a lot of secrets that she would like to unravel. So this is another one that is multiple point of view, which is not my favorite. I read one book in January that did it perfectly, and everything else has just seemed subpar since then. So there are 3 points of view, if I'm remembering right, and 2 different timelines. And this actually made me feel like I was reading 2 different books, because one of the points of view is way removed from the rest of the story and what is going on with it. Like, there's one point of view that is focusing on the house in modern times and kind of unraveling the mystery, and there's another point of view that takes place in the past. I really can't talk today for some reason. And that's kind of showing us what happened and answering the questions we have. And there's another point of view that is just way out there. I don't really know most of the relevance of it. It's just kind of there. It feels like two separate stories, but it still really hooked me in for a majority of the book. And I even ended up binging the last 2/3 of this book in one day because it just grabbed me and didn't let go. I just needed to know what was going to happen. It was very interesting to me, and it makes you think that there may be a cult involved, and I'm always really intrigued by that. So this book was kind of right up my alley. And then the last 50 pages happened, and then everyone was acting out of character. Things that had, like, really bad things that had happened earlier in the book were just never addressed, and people were trusting others that they shouldn't, and everyone just kind of acted like one big happy family when they really shouldn't be, and it was just so unbelievable. Like, obviously you're gonna have to have a suspension of disbelief in books, but this one just kind of went too far, especially with how out of character they were acting. Like, it's just, the ending did not make sense with how the characters were presented through the entire rest of the book. Another thing that doesn't really sit well with me is there was a reveal that I didn't think was needed, and it's one of those where it completely changes the story, but if you've read it, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But it was just poor taste, and was something that for me just took away from my enjoyment of the book rather than adding to it. However, since I really enjoyed the majority of this book, I only took off half a star for that weird reveal and OOC-ness at the end. So I did end up rating this 3.5 stars out of 5 in the end. It could have been a really, really strong 4-star read, but then the last 50 pages happened, so of course. I am really interested in reading other Lisa Jewell books, so if you have a favorite, let me know in the comments below. I have no idea what of hers I should read next, so I definitely wouldn't mind some suggestions. Alright, next is a book that I actually have in front of me, and that is Get a Life, Chloe Brown. So this is definitely a shocker for me to pick up since it is a contemporary romance, and I don't read romance. I definitely don't read straight romance books, like, ever. So this might actually be the first adult romance book I've ever read in my life. This was published in 2019. Like I said, it's considered a contemporary romance. Oh, I didn't even say who it was by. It's by Talia Hibbert. Holy crap. My mind is just right now. I wanted to read this for February because of Valentine's Day and Romance Month and all that, but this has always been like on hold at the library. However, it was magically there the other day, so I was able to pick it up and read it before the end of the month. The main reason that I wanted to read this book, besides it being February and all that, is the main character, Chloe. She has fibromyalgia, and I have fibromyalgia as well. I deal with a lot of chronic pain, and that's actually one of the reasons why I started a YouTube channel, is to kind of feel like I have something to strive toward and work toward, even if I can't work like a normal person. One thing I was worried about with that going in, though, is I was afraid it was something that was just going to be completely glossed over, just mentioned once and never talked about again kind of thing. But it's actually done really well. It's something that is always taken into consideration by the other characters. There are a lot of themes of how other people treat her because she has fibro, and about her learning she has it and her coping mechanisms and things like that. So there's so many themes surrounding it throughout the entire story. So I think the representation is done quite well. So I was really pleased with that. It was nice to see a character that I could really relate to in that aspect. So I mean, this is a romance. You can kind of expect what it is. It is enemies to lovers. It's barely enemies in my opinion. But the main character is Chloe. She moves out on her own to this apartment, and like the manager at the apartment building, I don't remember exactly what his title is, his name is Red, and they kind of get off on the wrong foot, but then things slowly start turning around as they realize their feelings for each other, and they kind of go from there. I've seen a lot of reviews on this, and I thought it was going to be a lot faster paced. This is actually a pretty slow buildup of a book, which I actually appreciated. There's a lot of just the interactions between them, the will they, won't they. They question their feelings a lot. There were a few odd moments that they had where the conflict just seemed kind of strange. Ooh, excuse me. But in a way, I think that was the point, because they both came from very different backgrounds. They both had their own toxic relationships that they had to deal with, and so they react to those differently. They have their own different kinds of triggers, and I think the conflict that a lot of people say seems very trivial, I think that was done on purpose to show how something that might seem really small to someone might be a really big deal to someone else. So I think that was kind of the point of that. But one thing I really appreciated about this book is that the characters were aware of their flaws. Like, after those conflicts happened, they were aware of, this happened and I reacted this way because of what happened to me in the past. So now I'm going to act like an adult and solve the problem and talk like an adult and get therapy if I need to work through it. And that was one thing I wasn't expecting, because I feel like in a lot of romance books, it's almost a lot of damaging relationships and things like that where they don't really realize their flaws. And I just really appreciated that these two characters were trying really hard to have a healthy relationship and not let the toxic things that happened in their past mess this up for them. One thing that I felt was strange was the dialogue, especially in the beginning. Chloe seems to talk like an old woman, and I thought that was really strange. Like, there were a few points where I really just wasn't sure what her age was, because she just talked so odd. Also, the interaction between her and Red, a lot of them just took me back to my high school days of reading fan fiction. Like, the dialogue was just way too familiar, so it felt kind of dull at times, because it just seemed like stuff I've read before and just wasn't that interesting, really. So overall, I ended up rating this 3 out of 5. As someone that does not read romance at all, I think it's a solid one, especially based on how their past and their relationship with each other was portrayed. But like, the dialogue itself and the events that actually move like the plot forward were just been there, done that, seen it before. But I did enjoy this so much more than I was expecting, and A+ for fibro representation. Finally, we get to end on another DNF question mark. So the next book is The Magicians by Lev Grossman. I have no idea if I'm saying his name right. So I know nothing about this book, so I can't really explain it. The only things I know is that there was a TV show made about it, and it has to do with magic. I have a friend that wanted to buddy read this, so that's why I picked it up, and that's why I don't know much about it, because I really like going into books being as blind as possible. So I haven't read the description or anything like that. This was published in 2009 and is a fantasy, so I guess that really is everything I know about it. I read the first 2 chapters, and I just don't have the desire to read any more. However, if you have personally read this and enjoyed it, please let me know down below if I should give it another chance. Like, should I keep trying to read it? My friend hasn't started it yet, so I don't know her opinions on it yet, but I just don't think this is gonna be for me. I read the first 2 chapters, and the main character, it's a little too misogynistic. Like, every female that comes into the picture, there has to be some weird remark about her, and he even does it in situations where it really doesn't make sense that you would be paying attention to that aspect of someone. And I'm actually going to read a passage from, I believe it's the first chapter. It really shocked me right out of the gate. Okay, so this is on literally page 13 of the first chapter, so not far into the book at all. So Quentin is the main character, by the way. says, Quentin wished she weren't so attractive. Unpretty women were so much easier to deal with in some ways. You didn't have to face the pain of their probable unattainability. But she was not unpretty. She was pale and thin and unreasonably lovely, with a broad, ridiculously sexy mouth. He's thinking about this in the presence of a dead guy on the floor, and this chick is a paramedic, and there's like police and detectives there and stuff, and it's just like, you walked into a room and there was a dead guy and this is what you're thinking about? Like, that was just a little much. And just you didn't have to face the pain of their probable unattainability. So he's 17 and he views women and how attainable they are. Okay, like that, I just wasn't really expecting that, I guess. Like, I don't know. Like, I know sometimes characters are written in ways where you're supposed to hate them, like you're supposed to dislike them. And that I'm filming. No, it's fine. And I understand that sometimes that's the point. It doesn't get better in the second chapter, and so my desire to read it just kind of died. But I am curious what others think about it, and if you think that I should continue it or just put it down for good. And that's it. That's all the books I read or attempted to read for February. I am currently reading The Midnight Library for a book club, and today is the 26th, so I might finish that before March 1st, but if I do, I'm just gonna put that on the March wrap-up. So yeah, thank you for hanging out with me today. It is always appreciated. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. That helps me out quite a lot. And bonne journée and au revoir.